You see this theme with people that get these really intense illnesses is they often, they started to question things beforehand. And this is what, well, in one sense, it can bring the trauma to the surface. And one thing's awakening often happens through life disruption. So that's what the illness is as well. For me, I was sick of my life and I'd wanted to stop suffering, basically. I was living an inauthentic life. I just couldn't keep going like that, right? Eventually, I don't know, life pushes you in this direction. Today I wanted to talk about how your chronic illness is awakening. It is the deepest investigation that you can take into yourself and the nature of reality. You can call it a spiritual awakening. The problem with using the word spiritual is people have all sorts of different ideas of what spirituality means, depending on their conditioning or what, whatever the mind has associated with spirituality. You could think it's like, manifesting things, and there's different branches of spirituality. But when I talk about awakening, I'm talking about truth. I'm talking about getting to the roots of who and what you are, what is going on, why do you suffer, what is this thing that we call the mind, what are these experiences of resistance that you struggle with, whether it's coming through in symptoms, whether it's coming through in emotions, whether it's coming through in mental anxiety. Why do human beings suffer? Why are we here? What are we doing here? Who are we? This is awakening, right? And then as I said, there's different branches of it. There's different things that people talk about, but true authentic awakening is your illness, right? So what do I mean by this? Let me break this down. And it's funny how much I see this with people. So if I look back to my life before I got sick with long COVID, which turned into like pretty severe chronic fatigue and just like a really crazy, absolutely obliterated me and my life, right? And that's what awakening is. It's not what you think it is. It's total obliteration of everything ever that you thought you were and thought you were going to do with your life and who you thought you were going to be. It gets obliterated, it gets shattered. But then the mind can become attached to that as well, right? Okay, so there's nothing to do, there's no one here. So it's like, it's the most ungraspable, like that you can't pinpoint what it is. The mind wants to turn it into something tangible. But I'm going a little bit astray here. What I wanted to touch on was the fact that you see this theme with people that get these really intense illnesses is they often, they started to question things beforehand. And this is what, well, in one sense, it can bring the trauma to the surface. And one thing's awakening often happens through life disruption. So that's what the illness is as well. But for me, I was sick of my life and I'd wanted to stop suffering, basically, before I got sick. I was living an inauthentic life and I just couldn't keep going like that, right? And you eventually kind of, I don't know, life pushes you in this direction is one way to say it. Whereas, people start with like self-help. For me, it was like trying to get more and more motivation because I used to go to the gym all the time. I should get more and more motivated. Why am I feeling this like depression? Why am I feeling this anxiety? Why am I feeling this? And then I start to get more into like, okay, like self-help, let's work with my head. Okay, let's work on my focus, right? Blah, 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 blah. And then like the more you start to dig in, reality is going to respond to that and say, okay, I was like, I want to know who the fuck I am. Like people are like, be yourself. Everyone's had that in their life, be yourself. And for me, that was like, who am I? I would watch movies or I would look at other people in the world and I'd be like, anytime, somebody would inspire me or something, I was like, I need to be like that person, But I never knew who this person was, right? The person that was always saying, I need to be like that person. But who was me, right? So that was always projected outwardly onto somebody else, that they're doing it right, so that's who I need to be. But at some point I was like, who am I? It wasn't even like spiritual self-inquiry. It was just a response to the suffering of being a human. And and then I've heard this many times with other people, is like or you start with some meditation or something, and maybe you have some nice experiences at first, and then, or you start with some psychedelics or something, and then bam, life hits you with the best possible thing for you to really find out who you are. It's going to shatter your ego. It's going to dissolve your sense of self, because it's going to dissolve your false sense of self, right? There's different ways of talking about this awakening thing. On one sense, there's the people that talk about, there's no self, there's nobody here. But what happens with awakening is, as your false sense of self dissolves, your more authentic, what you came here to actually do, right? What is your actual, your role? Like for me, I would never have been able to share this ability to help people to heal, to be able to express this truth of total acceptance, of total surrender, of total allowance, right? That's what people resonate with my sharing. That's in one sense one aspect of my most authentic expression. My most authentic expression would never have come through until life really hit me with an illness. So what I'm trying to say here is, my awakening only happened because I got sick. But before I got sick, I was starting to question life. I was starting to question me. I was starting to ask deeper, more existential questions driven by suffering. And then eventually it became a curiosity towards truth. But, and still the mind had this duality once I started to hear about awakening, and people talking about experiences beyond the mind from meditation, right? It really drew me in when I was sick, because I started meditating to deal with my symptoms. And I got so curious about it, but my mind was still seeing it as two separate things, right? It was seeing this awakening path is interesting. These people that go and meditate a lot, and they have these profound experiences of oneness, of a non-separate experience, of not feeling like a separate self. And my mind still saw my illness and my symptoms as a separate path, right? It was like, I can't go down this awakening journey because I'm stuck with this chronic illness. It's like, if I wasn't sick, then I would go on retreats, but I'm too sick, I have to stay at home, right? So the mind was still seeing it as two separate things. And then Angelo DeLulo, who I've mentioned a lot, was the teacher that really got through to me the most, with his expression of just no bullshit awakening, and the most comprehensive. And that's when it clicked. He was saying, sometimes you'll get it. Awakening happens through disruption. The most effective tool for awakening is complete disruption of your life. And it could happen through tragedy. It could happen, through death, of somebody really close to you. Just this complete seeing through that the way that you thought life was is not the case. And then he also said it can happen through these really mysterious illnesses. And obviously, right, there's different ways to talk about this illness, right? You can talk about it from the nervous system perspective, right? That it's got trapped in there's that whole path. The people that just talk more about the nervous system and the brain retraining and all of that, and that there's a partial truth to that. But I'm talking about a more a bigger perspective on this whole journey, right? The more encompassing awakening and the illness. That, sure, the nervous system stuff is true, right? You have this nervous system, and now it's having to process a lot because of repressed emotions and trauma that tightened up the nervous system over time, tightened it up, and eventually the nervous system got too tight, and it said, hey, you need to stop what you're doing, and we need to address this. So that side of it is true, right? The nervous system aspect is true. Not everybody awakens through illness, but your illness is also your awakening. If you're watching my content, there's a reason, right? There's other people that just talk about the nervous system. I thread in this deeper thread. So if you're still watching this video, then your illness is your awakening. Because if you're not interested in, even if the mind's not interested in, right, awakening starts before you even know it happens. I had this first big shift out of identification with my mind, identification with the ego, without even realizing that it was an awakening. That's why, again, awakening is just a term to point to something. The mind will have all ideas about what it is, but I use it because it's the only way to refer to this other aspect of the journey. But it's not what you can imagine. But the journey, to go back to what I was saying, the journey starts before you even realize it, right? It's a process that begins to unfold in your life through things starting to change. And there's different ways to talk about this, right? I don't want to get too esoteric because it puts people off. But, and understand when you really go deep with this, you start to understand that everything that happens to you is entirely because you wanted it to happen to you as part of your own kind of deeper growth journey. You could call it growth, right? These challenges are to crack you open into a version of yourself that would never come through without the most intense suffering and coming to terms with suffering to really understand what it is, what it means, why do you suffer, right? I cannot share what I share if I haven't been absolutely face to face with my own suffering multiple times. And in ways, whenever the mind thinks it's got a grasp on it, cool, I got this, right? I'm not going to suffer anymore. Life is like you falling for an ego trap. Here's something you hadn't seen. Let me pull the rug again. Under your own mind, right? And that's you. That's what you wanted for yourself, so that you don't kind of fall into this false version of you, right? Me, if I'd never had this horrific illness, I would not have found my, again, words like truest self, highest self. It puts people off because of, the way it's often used in spirituality, where it's packaged with a lot of spiritual stuff. But they're effective pointers, they're effective words to go from a false, inauthentic version of yourself to who you truly are at the deepest level. And the only way you actually find that out, or the most effective way you find that out, is when you're forced to go into all of these spaces that you would never go into if you were forced, but you see it as grace. I've mentioned this a couple of times, but Ajahn Shanti, a wonderful teacher and speaker on these topics, would speak about fierce grace. Fierce grace is when life fucks you up so that you can see that the you that you thought you were is not actually who you are. And it's grace because it's dissolving illusion. It's dissolving a version of yourself that you adopted in order to fit in, but you didn't come here to fit in. You came here to be you. But how are you going to find out who you are if you're not forced to step out of the world that everybody else is living in, right? Like, that's what this illness is. It's grace. I would never have gotten to investigate, sensations and symptoms and emotions and meditate so much unless life plucked me out of the world that I was in. It was like, okay, you're going to the gym all the time, you're studying, you're socializing, you're hanging out with a girlfriend, but I can see you're not happy. You're not being yourself. So I'm going to help you by fucking you up, the you that you think you are, but it's not who you are, and show you, I'm going to break you down so that the real you can crack through the seams. And it keeps happening, right? Every time the mind thinks this is the real me, it's shattered as well. And there's traps here, and you're going to go off the path there, and you're going to get lost here. But you're always your suffering is your compass to come back into this truth investigation. Who am I? Why do I suffer? Right? And you start to see it's all resistance. It's all avoidance. It's all mental interpretation. It's all fixation. It's all a belief around what you can handle. Unfortunately, in a sense, you can handle more than you think. So that's unfortunate to the part of you that has a belief on how much you can handle. I cannot handle any more intense sensation than this. I cannot handle any more emotion of helplessness, of this is too much than this. That's a belief. How do you see that that's a belief? Well, life will give you more. And then you'll see, wow, that was a belief. I can handle way more than ever. Like, there's things that I've sat with and experienced. If But this is why it's perfect, right? This is why I say you set this up for yourself, right? If these experiences had happened to me like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I don't know, like my mind would have been like, you know, this is fucking overwhelming. I'm gonna die. I cannot handle this. But your capacity grows. And it's, you know, this sounds very like scary in a sense, but it's also relieving. It's a stepping into like peace as well, because you're clearing things out, right? Things are passing through the system, and it can be very intense and very, you know, mind shattering and disorienting. But you're going in the right direction with all of this. So it's an emptying out, right? Awakening is an emptying out. And then you see that, yeah, there's a true peace in that. There's a true beauty in that, because then it's a natural expression. It's a natural flow, because you're emptying out your inauthentic self. You're emptying out your repressed emotions. You're emptying out your conditioning. You're emptying out your trauma. You're emptying out your mind identification. You're emptying out your resistance patterns. But it's a lot, right? It's a lot to let go of. You're going to lose every identity, everything you thought you were. It's a lot. So that's the one side of it. But the other side of it is the beauty, because when you empty out, you're not holding distance from anything anymore. You feel everything flows more naturally. You know, it doesn't always feel like this, right? Like, you should listen to my conversation with Vivi Okela. Her awakening, she had her first shift, and then just like such intense, horrific suffering and shadow work for years, right? So it's okay. It's part of the process, right? We have to go through this. And that's why I make these videos, because the more that you understand that it's okay, what is happening to you, it's a natural part of the process. It's as natural as a tree losing all of its leaves in the winter. That's the natural cycles of nature. Then it grows them back in the spring. But if it didn't clear out the old leaves, these brand new, fresh flowers and leaves and fruit that comes out in the spring wouldn't be possible. It's the same, but the tree doesn't have an ego that's saying, no, I'm losing everything, hold on to those old leaves. Oh my God, fuck, you know, I'm getting fucked up. What am I going to do? I'm losing all my leaves. It doesn't do that, because it doesn't have an ego. It doesn't have a separate self. It's totally part of the natural cycles of nature and the universe. And it's the same that's happening to you with your shadow work and your illness, that life is shedding you, right? But the mind thinks that something's gone wrong. It doesn't understand that this is a very natural, lawful process that has to happen, right? And then because that's your role, right? Like, the more this is happening to me, the more that I can speak and help people. And if my mind was still saying this is a bad thing that's happening to me, then I wouldn't be fulfilling my role the same way as like the tree just going through its cycles that it has to go through. But not it has to, but like that's it. That's its truest expression, is to lose its leaves and to grow new ones, you know? So I don't know if that analogy makes sense. Felt like a good one. But yeah, just know that whatever is happening in your life, there's a reason for it. But if you fight it, that's the key, right? If you accept that this is meant to be happening, then you can flow with it. But it will force you to accept. Hi. So yeah, I hope that helps you wherever you're at, whatever stage you're at. That's the right stage for you to be at right now. Just meet it. That's why, you know, don't compare your journey to me, because I only deepened in my journey by meeting my journey where it was at. You know, early on in my journey, I was, and there's been multiple stages of it where I was like, okay, it's like he's doing. Oh, okay, it's like they're doing. And it's right, because that person is showing you a way. But the best teacher is the one that points you back to yourself. And this is what I found, is teachers that were doing that for me. It's not anywhere else. It's where you're at right now. That's exactly where you're supposed to be. You can't be anywhere else. You don't need to be anywhere else, but you need to investigate this. Okay. I think that's enough for now. Good luck.